At the height of their imperial glory during the turn of the 11th century, the Fatimid Khilafah was one of the most powerful states in the world. But within a few decades, it entered a sharp decline that continued for over a century. It seemed to be on the verge of collapse at certain points in the 11th century. While it continued to trudge along for decades in a weakened state, this begs the question, how did the Fatimids, whose realm once stretched from the Atlantic to the Levant, enter such a rapid decline? The period following the mysterious disappearance of al-Hakim in 1021 saw a downward trajectory of the Fatimid state's prestige and power. In this regard, one thing that immediately became obvious after 1021 was the rapid and dramatic decline of the Caliph's personal authority. In conjunction with a few other factors, this led the Fatimid state to experience incredible turbulence from within. Out of the last 8 Caliphs that they had from 1021 until the end of the dynasty in 1171, 6 of them ascended while still minors. As a result, the door was opened for other actors to fill the vacuum of authority left in the absence of a strong leader. Prior to his death, al-Hakim had nominated his nephew Abdulrahman ibn Ilyas as his successor. But al-Hakim's sister, Sitt al-Mulk, was a powerful presence in the Fatimid government and engineered the succession so that al-Hakim's son, al-Zahir, could come to power. Until her death in 1023, imperial authority was largely wielded by Sitt al-Mulk. After her death, the person with the most power at the royal court became al-Jarjarai. A man who once fell victim to al-Hakim's displeasure and had both of his hands cut off, al-Jarjarai would remain the vizier for the next 2 decades. In 1036, the trend of minor caliphs ascending the throne was continued by al-Zahir's 7-year-old son and successor, al-Mustansir. Even when the Khalif came of age, power was not necessarily in his hands. After al-Jarjarai's death in 1045, the Khalif's mother, Rasad, played a domineering role in dictating Khalifal authority. A key consequence of her involvement in state affairs was the intensification of ethnic tensions within the army. Divisions within the Fatimid army could be traced back to Al-Aziz's reign, when the Masharika and Maghariba, represented by the Berbers and Turks respectively, clashed. Even though these 2 ethnic groups were the largest contingents, the Khilafah's army was a multi-ethnic force, comprising of Byzantine Greeks, Daylamites from northern Persia, and black African soldiers who, despite having a variety of ethnic backgrounds, were grouped together. Rasad, the Khalif's mother, was originally of sub-Saharan African origin, being described as Nubian or Sudanese. Under her patronage, black Africans were favoured and raised to important positions, much to the annoyance of the Turks and Berbers. These tensions were exacerbated by the fact that by the 1060s, Egypt's fiscal administration had broken down, and therefore the Khalif and his viziers sometimes found it difficult to pay their soldiers. This in turn led to the soldiers becoming more aggressive in their demands for restitution. A similar set of circumstances had befallen the Abbasids in the 9th and 10th centuries. It was not uncommon for Fatimid soldiers to take matters into their own hands and try to plunder wealth from ordinary, defenseless citizens throughout the Nile Valley and Delta. In 1062 and 1067, tensions spilled over into open battles between the black Africans and the Turks. With the Turks emerging victorious, they could pretty much make any demand of the Caliph. In the process, they resorted to looting the imperial treasury. Such a breakdown of law and order at the government level as well as at the local level brought the Khilafah to its knees. The general state of insecurity affected the cultivation of land across Egypt, but perhaps even more menacingly, geological issues surrounding the river Nile became obvious. The Nile has been considered the lifeline of Egypt, and for good reason. In the past, when its waters rose sufficiently, it helped Egypt become known as the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. The entire country's economy was intimately tied to the Nile, meaning that when droughts hit, the results were disastrous. And so in the 1060s, the compounding effects of low waters from the Nile and poor land cultivation resulted in a famine. Cairo, the center of government, was reliant upon the countryside for food supply. But since the countryside was ruled by Nasir al-Dawla, a leader of the Turkic soldiers who was antagonistic to the Caliph, the capital was the worst affected by the famine. Tales of ridiculously high prices, every type of animal being eaten, and eventually even cannibalism can be found in the chronicles of the time. It is said that Khalif al-Mustansir was able to feed himself only with the generous charity of his citizens. To make matters worse, in 1070, Nasir al-Dawla, from his seat in Alexandria, switched his allegiance to the Abbasids and requested troops from the Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan. The Fatimid state was now literally on the verge of destruction. Nonetheless, nothing really materialized from this plan, since Sultan Alp Arslan had to deal with a Byzantine force that was moving into eastern Anatolia, a set of circumstances that resulted in the pivotal Seljuk victory at Manzikert in 1071. In late 1073, in a rare show of his Khalifal authority, al-Mustansir took the initiative to call upon Badr al-Jamali, an Armenian Fatimid general who was contending with the troublesome Seljuk-affiliated Turkoman nomads in Syria. Badr had a disciplined force, largely comprised of fellow Armenians that were loyal to him. Therefore, he was well situated to bring an end to the chaos and anarchy which afflicted Egypt at the time. In some senses, Badr evoked the image of Jawhar 100 years prior, bringing peace and stability to Fatimid Egypt through his sheer hard work and determination. By 1076, Badr had conquered the entire country in the name of the Fatimids once again. In the process, he instituted the rule of the Viziers of the Sword, in which a series of military strongmen viziers assumed executive authority over the realm. Whilst these viziers prevented the immediate collapse of the empire and played a key role in stabilizing it, they were not enough to stop Fatimid decline. Corruption and rivalries within the administration persisted. The far-flung territories of the empire asserted their independence one by one, and the economy continued to suffer. The introduction of the European Crusaders to the region at the turn of the 12th century didn't help matters, as the Fatimids were pushed out of Palestine. But it wouldn't be until 1171 when Salahuddin would finally abolish the Fatimid Khilafah in his quest to assert his own legacy. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the full-length documentary I made on the Fatimids for their entire history. As usual, big thank you to all of my patrons for financially supporting me. If you want to do the same, click the link in the end screen or in the description to this video. Until next time, peace!